I was playing alone, the glow of my old Game Boy casting sickly green light across my room. The clock read 2:43 a.m., and I should have been asleep, but nostalgia had its claws in me. The cartridge was some dusty copy of Pokémon Silver I'd picked up days earlier. It had worked fine at first, familiar music, pixelated sprites, everything I remembered, but then the screen froze mid-battle, the cheerful chiptune warping into something low, distorted almost like a slowed-down heartbeat. At first I thought it was just the cartridge acting up. These old games glitched all the time, until the text box opened. Not the usual dialogue window with Professor Oak or some random NPC. No. This one had my name, my real name, and the words "We've been waiting for you" name. I dropped the Game Boy, my stomach twisted cold and my throat went dry. That wasn't possible. The game didn't know me. It couldn't, and yet the sprite on the screen, my character, stopped moving. His face, a blocky little mess of pixels, turned upward like he was staring out. At me. Here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. I swear I heard something beneath the static-laden music. A whisper. Faint, like words slipping through the cracks of the 8-bit soundtrack. If I had pulled the cartridge out right then, maybe I wouldn't still hear the music when the console is off. But I didn't, because I needed to know where that cartridge came from. It started innocently enough. My life had slipped into the same loop. Work, eat, doomscroll, sleep. Rinse, repeat. Nostalgia became my escape hatch, and lately I'd been diving headfirst into retro gaming. Pokémon had always been my comfort food for the brain, something simple, colorful, safe. So when I stumbled across a flea market stall stacked with battered cartridges, I couldn't resist. Most of them were scratched beyond recognition. Marker scribbled on plastic, labels half peeled. That's when I saw it, Pokémon Silver. My childhood favorite. The label was faded, the corners water-warped, but it felt heavier in my hand than it should have. I asked the seller how much. He glanced at it, then at me like he wanted to say no. Finally, he muttered, $5. When I handed him the bill, his fingers lingered a second too long. Then, almost under his breath, he added, "Don't play it at night." I laughed awkwardly, assuming he meant battery drain or some kind of collector's joke. But the look in his eyes stuck with me. They weren't amused. They were warning. I slipped the cartridge into my pocket, eager to relive old memories. That night, I put it in the console. When I slid the cartridge into my old Game Boy and heard that familiar chime, I actually grinned. The logo flashed, the music played, except not quite. It was slower, dragging, like someone pressing piano keys underwater. The sound looped twice before the title screen finally appeared. I brushed it off. It was an ancient cartridge. Glitches were part of the charm, but when I started a new game, things felt wrong. The professor's dialogue boxes flickered, the text crawling instead of typing smoothly. His sprite twitched once like he'd blinked too many times in a row. Then came the starter Pokémon screen. I expected Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle lined up like always. Instead, two were there, a little distorted but recognizable. The third slot was nothing but a black square with a white question mark. I thought it was hilarious, a bugged file maybe. So of course I clicked it. The screen stuttered. For half a second I thought the console froze. Then the text box appeared, but instead of the usual name, it only said, "Are you sure?" I laughed nervously and pressed A. The game didn't ask again. It just went black, then loaded my character with the nameless Pokémon at my side. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the game stopped being a game. At first I thought the weird starter was just a gimmick, some ROM hack left on the cartridge maybe, but then the dialogue started changing. When I walked into the first town, an NPC greeted me, not with the usual welcome, but with my actual name, my real name, the one I'd used to save the file. No, the one on my driver's license. I froze. I hadn't entered that anywhere. I kept playing. My palms suddenly sweaty against the plastic shell of the Game Boy. Another villager shuffled over and typed out a line in agonizingly slow text. "Why are you playing in the dark?" I looked around my room. The curtains were drawn, just my desk lamp casting a yellow glow. It wasn't dark, but still my throat went dry. I tried to laugh it off. "Okay, that's creepy coding." I moved my character forward, hoping for a normal battle, anything. Instead, a shopkeeper sprite blocked the path. His face flickered, mouth opening wider than the pixel grid should allow. The dialogue box appeared. "Stop slouching. You're being watched." And without even thinking, I sat up straighter. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. It wasn't some fan-made hack. The game was aware, watching, responding in ways it had no right to. I should have turned it off right then. But I needed to know how deep it went. So I pressed on, deeper into the cartridge's world. It didn't take long for the real horror to show itself. The first wild battle felt normal, Pidgey level 3. But when my corrupted starter fainted, the screen didn't flash, you blacked out. Instead, the text read, "Pokemon's is dead, dead, not fainted." I stared, waiting for the game to reset the sprite back to my party. But when I checked the menu, the slot was empty. My starter was gone. Permanently. Hours later, when I reached Lavender Town, I felt sick. There were gravestones in the tower I didn't remember from the original game. Each one bore the name of a Pokemon I had lost. And then I saw it. One gravestone that didn't fit. A tiny block of pixels that spelled out my own name. I turned the console off so fast the screen bled into static. For a moment I thought I saw my reflection in the dark plastic of the Game Boy screen. Except it wasn't quite right. The face staring back at me had two wide eyes, a smile I wasn't making. I should have stopped. But I didn't. Curiosity is cruel like that. It pulls you deeper, even when you already know you won't like what you find. I thought maybe it was just a glitch. Corrupt saves. Buggy ROM hack, some kid with too much time on their hands. So I tried the usual fixes. First I reset the console. No change. The distorted reflection sprite stared back at me on the title screen, smiling too wide. Next I tried deleting the save. I held down up plus select plus B, the sacred purge. The file was gone. For a second I felt relief, until I restarted. The save was back. Same trainer name, same corrupted Pokemon list. Except this time the Lavender Town graveyard had one more marker than before. I hadn't even played. That night I told myself I'd had enough. I turned off the Game Boy, stuffed it in a drawer, and went to bed. But when I woke up, the console was already on. Screen lit. That looping 8-bit Lavender Town theme humming softly. The save file had changed again. My sprite was standing outside my house in Pallet Town, but the walls looked wrong, like they were rotting. And on the screen, a dialogue box waited for me. "You can't turn me off." I should have thrown it out right then, but instead I sat down. My hands moved on their own, pressing A to continue. Because by then I needed to know what came next. I needed answers. So I did what anyone does when something feels wrong. I Googled it. Haunted Pokémon Cartridge. Cursed save file. Lavender Town glitch. The rabbit hole opened fast. Old forum threads. Archived blog posts, half-deleted Reddit comments. Most were jokes, urban legends. But buried among the memes and creepypasta knockoffs were posts that felt familiar. Too familiar. One user described a starter menu with a fourth option. Another swore their Pokemon never fainted. They died. Someone else uploaded blurry photos of their Game Boy screen. Distorted sprites, gravestones multiplying. Their last line before the post cut off mid-sentence read, "If your reflection smiles before you do, it's too late." I felt my stomach turn. My reflection sprite had already been smiling. Scrolling deeper, I found fragments, screenshots of vanished threads, cached whispers of people begging for help. The pattern was always the same. Curiosity, the cartridge, then silence. Accounts abandoned. Posts ending mid-word. Like the writers had been interrupted. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some unique glitch, some one-off ROM corruption. My cartridge wasn't special. It was chosen, and now so was I. The thought should have made me quit. Should have made me burn the damn thing. But instead, my pulse quickened. Because if others had fallen before me, maybe they left clues. Maybe I could finish the story they couldn't. I picked up the Game Boy again and pressed start. I thought I was imagining it at first, the faint notes of Lavender Town's theme drifting through the room. But the console was off. The cartridge wasn't even inside. Still, the music played, tinny and warped, like it was echoing from inside my skull. That's when the shadows began to move, not long, stretching silhouettes like normal, but pixelated. Jagged, blocky shapes that flickered against my bedroom walls as if cast from a broken screen. They crawled across the floor in halting frames, skipping forward like bad animation until they brushed against my feet. The air went cold. I staggered back, knocking into the TV stand. The Game Boy lay on top, untouched, until a single droplet slid from the cartridge slot. I stared, frozen, as more followed. Not sweat, not condensation, pixelated water, like tiny blocks of liquid falling into the real world. They hit the floor with a splash that sounded too loud, too wet. Then the screen of the Game Boy blinked on by itself. My reflection sprite was there again, warped beyond recognition. Its face stretched wide in a smile, its eyes empty white squares. And just beneath it, in broken text, the game spoke. "You can't turn us off." The music swelled, distorted, no longer bound by speakers. My room vibrated with it. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew there was nowhere to go, because the game wasn't inside the console anymore. It was inside my house. The Game Boy's screen lit up brighter than it ever had, forcing me to squint. A battle screen loaded, but the trainer opposite me wasn't red or blue or anyone from the game. The name above their sprite read only one word, "You." I glanced down at my own team and froze. They weren't Pokémon. Each sprite was twisted into something that shouldn't exist. The outline of my childhood bedroom door, the mangled face of my first pet, the looming silhouette I sometimes swore I saw outside my window. Every one of them was a fear I had tried to bury. The battle text appeared. "Lose and we take more than your game." I tried to move, but the buttons felt stuck. On the screen, my reflection sprite twitched. Then, God help me, it blinked before I did. Its grin spread wider, like it already knew the outcome. The battle raged, but no matter what choice I made, my team fell one by one. Each feint echoed in my room as a thud, as if something had collapsed behind me. I refused to turn around. When my last sprite fell, the screen went black. Then a single line appeared in stark white text. "We win." The reflection on the dead screen smiled wider than ever. And then, without warning, everything went dark. Room, console, even the sound. I don't remember hitting the floor. I only remember the silence after. I woke up the next morning, the Game Boy cold in my hands, my head pounding. Sunlight streamed through the window, mundane and ordinary. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But the glitches stayed. Screens flickered when I wasn't near them. My cat, once curious about every blinking light, refused to enter the room with the console. Reflections in mirrors and windows sometimes lagged behind my movements just a fraction of a second, like a delayed recording mocking me. I haven't touched the cartridge in weeks. I keep it in a locked drawer under layers of clothing, in a box that feels heavier than it should. Yet sometimes late at night I hear the faint chime of the level-up sound, as if my Pokémon, or my fears, are still growing somewhere. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, exhaustion, imagination running wild. But every time the screen flickers, every time the shadows twitch just wrong, the memory of that final battle returns. I survived. I think, but the glitches don't care. They linger. They watch. They wait. By reading this, you've already touched it. Not physically maybe, but with your mind. The story itself carries the game. Every detail you remember, every image you visualize, it's a thread connecting you to the cartridge. If you go to your console tonight, if it turns on by itself, don't check what's inside. Don't press start. Don't even breathe near it. Because if the game loads even just for a second, it's already chosen you. Your fears, your memories, the shadows you pretend don't exist, they become part of its world. You don't get to leave. The line between player and played dissolves. I warn you because I survived. But survival isn't freedom. It's just waiting, and now so are you.